Hello, welcome back to Madrona's Pulse Teachings. I am Iris, and we are chatting about Saturn moving back into Pisces. This is a really big shift. I'm making this video to hopefully put out some support there for folks for these next few months, because we're talking about the next few months. And this is pulling up themes that you've been working with. This is even pulling up themes from last September, because this is eclipse season. Everything that I'm talking about with Saturn right now absolutely feeds into the intensity of eclipse season right now. However, before I go into Saturn, I just want to say thank you to folks who have been sending prayers for rain to us here in Nova Scotia. I've been very touched reading them, and I just wanted to make sure that I thanked you. If you don't mind continuing to send them, we haven't received hardly any rain here, and we are having some struggles with some big wildfires. So thank you so much for thinking about the folks here and the land here. And in this time of extremes, and we are in a time of extremes, and I hope that you are doing okay, whatever you are journeying with right now. And that's also why I wanted to make this video, because it's a really big moment. And there may be some intensity in the next few months. And so what are we talking about? We are talking about Saturn on September 1st, moving back into Pisces, and it will journey in Pisces until February of 2026, when it will come and it will conjunct Neptune. That signals the rebirthing of Saturn. That is the rebirthing of the bone mother fire witch archetype within ourselves. A lot more on that later. That is, however, we cannot get there without major release and surrender. And that is what this next stage of Saturn in Pisces represents, especially from September 1st through to the end of November. That is Saturn's retrograde. As we begin December, Saturn is direct at 25 degrees of Pisces, which is what it's stationing back to, and it's moving forward. And we are beginning to integrate. As that happens, we are moving towards the birth canal that puts us from Pisces into Aries for that final time for Saturn in the next 30 years. And before that, however, now pretty much through the end of November, Saturn is retrograde. That is an intensified stage of release, of endings, and these are deep endings. It very much could be stories coming up in the present moment that are also bringing you into some really deep layers of yourself that most likely could be bringing up themes of childhood, that could be bringing up themes of past lives, could be bringing all of it up. This Saturn is releasing structures of the self that you have been carrying with you for a long time, that you do not need anymore. Now, wherever you have those last 5 degrees of Pisces in your chart, that's going to show you kind of more information about the environment of your life in which this is releasing. But if you don't work with your chart, then just feel into intuition. When you feel endings coming up, what comes up for you? And these could be deep and these could be tender. And we really need to honor the next few months. Okay, so as we move into September, we are shifting from primal fire into the oceanic depths of surrender in yin water. That's a big shift. Now, Saturn is retrograde, so we have already been in a bit of a process of release, but there's a big difference between Aries, especially 0 and 1 degrees of Aries, and the final degree of the zodiac. And so September 1st, that Saturn comes to the final degree of the zodiac, and then we have our first eclipse, that lunar eclipse at 15 degrees of Pisces. So that eclipse is working with this Saturn shift. And we really, really want to surrender. That is a word for Pisces. And what do we want to surrender? The ego. Pretty simple. Because this is about the dissolving of the self. Now, on the one hand, that's what Pisces represents. But on the other hand, this is about the ending of the structures of the self, that the parts of the structures of the self that simply are not going to serve you in the new reality that you are moving into. And the final degrees of the zodiac, they include grief. They include experiences beyond the mind's comprehension. They include the need and the importance of trusting intuition, also potentially reclaiming intuition. So all those folks in your life, if there's a few of them, if there's a lot of them that called you too woo-woo or called you too creative or not, your creativity wasn't the right type of creativity, or whatever stories have been put on yourself that most likely we internalize and start kind of using with our own inner critic. Whoosh. Cosmic broom sweeping them out. Okay, they're going out into that ocean. Ocean is churning them, and they are turning into compost in that watery way, because that is part of what is being cleared out here. Because we are entering a time when the intuition is going to be vital to Saturn. That reclaimed bone mother fire witch, she works with her intuition in her bones. That is what allows her to have this beautiful maturity of fire that is also birthing a new myth of what Saturn even means. And that is so important. And this is a difference between evolutionary astrology and traditional astrology. It's also a difference between embodied evolutionary astrology and traditional evolutionary astrology. So many categories. We humans love our categories, and they can cause trouble. They can help us, but they can cause a lot of trouble. But when we move from an embodied, co-creative place, we are not working with the planets are this and the archetype is that and I am this. We are in this beautiful co-creative dance. And Saturn is going through a spiritual rebirth with Neptune. That is why this is such an intense time. All the planets are part of that spiritual rebirth. Pluto's part of it, Uranus and Sedna are part of it. And Saturn makes it so personal because it comes into the structures by which you are able to tell the difference between what's real and what's not real. The borderline of reality, and yet the reality of that borderline is that just like that ebbing and flowing of the shoreline, it is ebbing and flowing. And as Saturn moves back into Pisces, the shoreline of your reality is changing, which means that your sense of self and your identity and your psyche is changing. And this is part of why you're here. And it does not matter if you are 80 or 25 or 55 or 37. It's happening now. This is the moment for your soul when it needs to happen. Please, if you have any stories of it took me too long to get to whatever's opening up for you, if there's any of those judgments of too long or any shaming, please, swept away. They're not going to serve you. You have lived through what you've lived through. There's a reason. There's so many reasons why it's happening now. And you might not even totally know it's happening now. And you also might be in the wilds. You might be in the thick of it. I know I've been in the wilds. It has been an exhausting time in some ways because so much is changing. And as Saturn moves back into Pisces, this is ultimately about allowing what is a massive karmic clearing. And there might not even be words that can fully name what's happening. It is lovely to work with poetry, to music, drumming, dancing, visual art, whatever your mediums, your aesthetic interventions are, weave them through your especially through eclipse season, but weave them through Saturn and Pisces. especially during the release, because sometimes when we externalize that energy that's within us, we don't need to have it in A plus B equals C. We don't need to understand, but it does need a shape and a container. And that's what the arts are so wonderful for. And the arts as a container for expression is part of the Pisces archetype. And you may find that you're actually able to express quite a bit as Saturn moves back into Pisces. So you do want to lean into that, especially if you are feeling a lot, especially if there's a lot of grief present, especially if you are feeling some birthing energy, but you don't know where it's taking you, or you're feeling the death energy and you don't know where that's taking you. The complexity of this time is that both are present. There is death energy and there is birthing energy. And we are in cycles within cycles, and there's a lot of layers. And yet we don't need to put words to the layers so much as we need to come home to ourselves, to our breath, to our body, to the moments of being within liminality and just allowing. Because that is ultimately what that yin water is requiring as Saturn moves back into Pisces. And really, if you have intentions, if you do know that you're closing something out, if you do know that you are ready for a chapter to be done, then you do want to hold ritual for yourself over the next few months. And especially in Pisces, you want to move when it calls you. Saturn in Pisces is not about moving from the mind. It is so not about control. It is not about cognitive control. It is about the moment opening and we just know. It is about trusting your intuition. It is about just following the threads and allowing them to restore you and not needing to know the outcome of the story because we cannot know it. Saturn needs to go back to 25 degrees. Then it needs to station direct in the end of November, and it needs to come back through those final 5 degrees. And then it needs to go through the cosmic birth canal, and then it's going to connect to conjunct Neptune. And then we are fully, we can say, through the rebirthing, and we are beginning the journey forward with new identities, with new structures, with new desire birth, because ultimately Saturn coming back into Aries in 2026 will be the rebirthing of new desires that a younger version of you wouldn't even have understood. These are new and they are aligned with the outer planets. They are aligned with Sedna, who is transforming what healing even means, who is bringing about new myths of why we're here, of what it means to follow the path that you're on. And Saturn is how we are doing that by forming new structures of selfhood. But the self is dissolving. It is going back into Pisces. And so going with the flow, leaning into intuition, trusting dream, synchronicity, these are going to be what are really serving us. Nature, leaning into nature, trusting nature, reading, listening to your intuition in nature, water. Again, those art practices, all of that is going to help you release what needs to be released. And folks, I know that it could be really deep. It could be a hard time. This is a karmic, we're in eclipse season. There is karmic unravelings. And yet remembering, this is why you're here. And you are restoring your soul's journey. And it is part of all of us here in this community and other communities that you're part of. We're all part of this collective restoring, and you are not alone during this, even if it sometimes feels like that. And remember, when Saturn's in Pisces, like we're talking about, the bone mother is in Pisces with the goddess. You are not alone. She is in you. And so having the practices that help you come into more of that meditative awareness, that flow state in which you hear the goddess calling you, and listen for the call. Listen for the call throughout the next few months. There may be various calls, however it arrives, and allow life to shift organically. We are not in control. The outer planets are restoring this human experience for us, and we are co-creating with it. But the new paradigm is about not needing to be in control. The new paradigm is about not comparing ourselves to versions that were overpowered by the old paradigm, because we're just not living that. And Saturn going through Pisces that we're pretty much in, this is the dissolving for the birthing of the new paradigm. And Saturn is so important in how we story that paradigm. And so catching ourselves, if you're judging yourself or shaming yourself in a way that comes from kind of those power over, no, we don't need to do that. We are talking about new paradigms being birthed. And also that means turning the gaze away from the places where we see the paradigms that we do not want. And that's power over, those traditional power over paradigms, even when it's wrapped up in rhetoric of some, I don't know, spiritual something or celebrity something, turning the gaze and really taking the next few months as we move through eclipse season and into the fall and winter in the northern hemisphere, really filling your gaze, directing your gaze towards nature, towards the stories that fill you up, towards the stories that represent what you want in your life, the stories that represent power with, not power over. Writing those stories, drawing those stories, meditating and journeying, being in community, shared community, enrolling in programs that are going to teach you how to make those stories and listen to them because they're already birthing and we really just have to listen. So much of unlearning is just the deep listening. And Pisces is beautiful for that. And Saturn, but it is going to unravel. There are stories that are unraveling, and we want to, on the one hand, let them unravel, but on the other hand, honor them. Honor the journey that got you here. Honor what is ending. Say a prayer, cast a spell, go out and bury something in nature that represents it, or ask a body of water to carry it away. Honor the stories and the unravelings, because that honoring is the shifting into the next realm. There's this beautiful moment. I spent many years studying Dante's Divine Comedy, but it's so beautiful because when Dante journeys down into the pit of hell, which for Dante does not look like the raging fire, and he encounters Satan, he's with his guide Virgil, poet, of course, taking him through the circles of hell. And they're journeying around Satan, and without even knowing it, they're just walking around this frozen being. And suddenly their whole perspective shifts, and suddenly they're in a new realm, and they're walking upright, and they're spiraling up into the rungs of purgatory, which in Dante's world is actually the most similar to our human experience here on earth, where we're sloughing off these layers and we're just shedding and shedding. And sometimes it happens, we don't even know. We're just kind of so focused on the steps and where we're going and our guides. And suddenly we're reoriented and we're walking in a new world and we're walking in a new way and we're walking as a new self. And that is ultimately what Saturn is helping us to do from really as we move through September and then into February. And so pay attention when your orientation is shifting. Pay attention when you're noticing yourself, oh, this is a new path. And probably there's going to be an overlap of the old and the new and the old and the new. And then we're going to be in the new. And we'll be chatting about that when it's time. Okay, as always, I am sending lots of love, and I will see you soon.